All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Megan Wolff. She is an experienced restoration ecologist, and she uses that knowledge that she's gained as a restoration ecologist in her native plant gardening. And so today she's going to talk about the Point Vicente demonstration garden, which she has been gardening since December 2015. So we counted it up. That's 8 complete years. She's into her 9th year. She now works at Tidal Influence on various consulting projects. So we chatted a little bit about that before the meeting started. So in case you missed that, she's happy to answer your questions about that. She previously worked for the PV Land Conservancy, where she did stewardship and volunteer programs for 7 years. And then recently changed to Tidal Influence, where she has taken the next step in her career. So without further ado, I think I will introduce Megan Wolff.
Thank you, Brent, for that warm introduction. As Brent was saying, the title of the talk is 8 Years Gardening for the Conservation of the Palos Verdes Coastline. I don't know if we are covering the entire coastline here, but this small part of it is meant as a demonstration, as a demonstration garden. So here we go. So this is me in the garden. My name is Megan Wolff. I've been the garden manager since December 2015. And I feel like a lot of my career has been in the garden, and I've learned so much caring for it. So I'm going to just jump right into things. I found these photos on Google Earth. You can do the time lapse going backwards. And this is almost as far back as it goes for the Point Vicente Interpretive Center, at least in its current design. So this is 2005. And you can see there, it's so blurry, so very sorry about that, not my picture. But you can see that it's mostly mulch and boulders at this point. There's probably some plants installed, but this is pretty early. You can see a little bit of a change in 2006, some plants establishing. 2007 is when you really start to see some vegetation and filling in around here, but it takes a lot of time to establish a garden, and so that's really the lesson here. 2008 is looking even better. And 2009 is actually a quality picture, so you can kind of see where the gaps are and where things are growing in the garden. And it's really funny to look at this and look at the final picture, which is today's picture, and how some of these plants are doing well in some of the same places. That doesn't makes a lot of sense. And in 2011, the garden really starts to look established. 2013, it looks like we may have lost some plants, or there's dryness. It's hard to tell with these images. 2014, that trend continues. 2015 is the year when I started my involvement with the garden. It's starting to get a little bit dry in some places. Hard to tell here, but it's looking pretty good in 2016. One of my goals was to just have green plants. So I kept it really simple, and you can kind of see the green coming through in the image. And then I kind of continued that in 2017. There's a big change here between 2017 and 2020. You see there's a lot of mulch in the garden. There's a lot of gaps also, and I'll explain that further in my talk, but there were some necessary plant removals. And then this is looking kind of like 2011, like 10 years ago. That's kind of funny. 2021, you see some of the same gaps, but things are recovering. And then this is 2023. So yeah, I just wanted to walk you guys through some of the changes since this garden has been planted. And I'm showing you pictures here from Tony Baker of when this garden was installed in the 80s. And there's a picture in 98 here of some of the epilobium, for example, and the buckwheat. There's different signage than what we see in the garden today, showing the Dudleya species that's so important in the garden. So the city of Rancho Palos Verdes and the South Coast chapter of the California Native Plant Society partnered to establish the garden to provide living demonstrations of native plants to educate the community. The native plant garden was originally designed in 1988 by Rick Dykesel and was redesigned in 2005 by Tony Baker, Angelica, and Rick following the World War II lead contamination cleanup. So I think personally, it's so sad to look at these pictures because the garden really was thriving before they had to do the lead contamination cleanup. But these are also some very exciting pictures. You see Tony up in the corner there, helping to place the plants for what is the garden today. I thought it was important to include these pictures and not just the 8 years that I have been managing the garden, because it is so much more than that. And it's always a huge part of the story, the installation of the garden itself. Let's see. Here we go. The garden features native plant species local to the Palos Verdes Peninsula. So coastal sage scrub, grassland, wildflower, sometimes those are intertwined, and cactus scrub habitats are represented, with the dominant plant community being the coastal sage scrub. So I think it's important that we started with the history of the garden, because when I arrived in December 2015 to start this role, this is what the garden looked like. And there are live plants in the garden, but the ones that I saw more of were very stressed from just water stress. And here's another look. I don't want to emphasize this too much. As we saw in the slides before, the garden really had a evolution over time, and it wasn't even clear in 2015 that there was a lot of dryness, and part of this is due to the season. But you can see in the corner, January 2016 is already looking a little bit better. So we didn't waste any time. In January 2016, I began involving the community with restoration events that our goal was to introduce water to the garden and to also plant plants in the bare spaces. And you can also see there is some seacliff buckwheat planted right here by the pathway. And this is for the Segundo Blue butterfly. So I had some fun putting together a few of my favorite pictures of volunteers. We hosted 97 volunteer events over this time. frame. And I think it's kind of amazing just that we had so many volunteers. My largest event that I had was probably 95 people, which is insane for the size of the garden. But yeah, volunteers would do things such as pruning, hedging, planting, watering, trail work, and irrigation repair. Not limited to those things, but those are what we do most often. I forgot to add mulching. Mulching is pretty common for our strategy to retain moisture in the soil, and weed abatement as well. So this is a typical volunteer group that I might receive on a Sunday morning. So, roughly 10, 15 people. And that's perfect for what we want to do. As I mentioned, our maintenance plan is maintained primarily by volunteers every third Sunday of the month. And for several years, I also offered weekly maintenance with trained volunteers to work on special tasks. And I'll mention a couple of those with the photos, but there were some things like working with cactus that didn't quite make sense to do with our regular volunteer days. We also had seasonal maintenance as part of the plan. And so we had planting and seeding the garden in the fall and winter, establishment in the spring, and mulching in the summer. And then we really irrigated most seasons to give the garden a leg up. So how did we irrigate the garden? That was one of the first things that I worked on, was actually adding a irrigation system. These are micro sprinklers, and they have micro tubing that's hooked up to a main line. And you can kind of just turn it on and off manually to water the garden. And this was just our way of kind of mimicking rain throughout the garden. But it isn't without its maintenance concerns. You can see in this left photo, this is a chewed up piece of irrigation that we had to cut out and replace. But I think, in terms of the changes that I've made in the time that I have started maintaining this garden, having irrigation that can readily water the garden with just turning on a spigot, I think that was like most impactful for the health of the plants. We also had some maintenance that was required by the city. So we do take requests from the city if there is something that is obtrusive, is usually the case for various weddings and other events that are hosted at the Point Vicente Interpretive Center. And so to the left, you can see we took the Baccharis pilearis, the coyote bush, and trimmed it all the way down to the railing. And that's pretty dramatic hedging back, but the plants seem to be bouncing back from that. So we can appreciate that. Another situation that we have is the sugar bush that's on right in front of the event room at Point Vicente Interpretive Center. That is constantly being hedged back, and it grows back beautifully. I actually wonder how large it would be if we hadn't been pruning it every couple of months. And I mean, it can grow to a great size. And so I would not recommend this for a public garden for these reasons that we have to do so much maintenance on it. And then something else that we have to worry about continuously is that the trails are at a certain grade where when it rains, it just ruts out. And so we have to do a certain level of trail repair here and there. Okay, so in this part, I wanted to just showcase just how much California buckwheat and how large the California buckwheat was in the garden. These pictures were taken probably 2017, 2018. And it can be an amazing wildlife plant with many, many hosts or hosting many, many different types of insects and species. And I think it's definitely an appropriate plant in most places. However, we made a decision to remove all of the California buckwheat from the garden because the insects or the butterflies and the moths, they would compete. And El Segundo Blue butterflies rely on sea cliff buckwheat. And in many places, such as the LAX dunes, where the butterflies are doing well, they had to remove the California buckwheat or choose not to plant California buckwheat because of that competition problem. So here we are in 2019. We start to, it took a long time to decide that this was the right way to go. But we started removing large sections of the buckwheat, little at a time. I didn't want it to be too dramatic and that it was all done in one day, for example. We can see these bare spaces are starting to be created. You might wonder what these pots are doing buried inside the soil there. That's me trying something out with the blue dicks, which are bulbs, and you can plant them in pots so that critters don't get to them. But also, this is a great picture showing the removal of the California buckwheat. And this is a little bit later showing areas that had California buckwheat. They don't have them anymore, and we start to revegetate. So we have planting going on pretty consistently in these areas to try to establish things. But one of the lessons is that, well, one, it's really hard to remove native plants because they have amazing root systems. So it was quite an endeavor to take them out at all. But also, it's so hard to replace established plants. And so it will take time for us to recover from this. But it also provided an opportunity to have things like wildflowers that we didn't really have a high diversity of in the garden. So I'm trying to get wildflowers going in these sections that are bare. And I have cages around some of these poppies because I'm finding that the rabbits that live in the garden like to chew on the plants. Okay, so I noticed in that short period of time from when we removed California buckwheat and wholesale replaced it with sea cliff buckwheat, which is the plant that's featured here, we saw more and more butterflies in the garden. And we had biologists from the Land Conservancy noting how important the garden was as a home for the El Segundo blue butterfly. And the bright blue ones are males. We, of course, are not all about just the El Segundo blue butterflies. There are a lot of other species in the garden that are critically important. And part of the California Native Plant Society's mission is to have an appreciation of California native plants. So sometimes I like to take pictures of people taking pictures of plants in the garden. This is island green Dudleya, of course. And I've taken more pictures than you can imagine of the garden. And these are a few of my favorites of the wildflowers that we see in the Point Vicente Interpretive Center demonstration garden. There's the California fuchsia. There's a monkey flower, sticky monkey flower. There's kind of there's like a hybrid of the coastal poppy and the California poppy. Bush sunflower, which I'm sure you are familiar with if you live on the peninsula or in coastal areas. We have the wishbone, bladderpod, ceanothus, the San Diego sunflower, castegia, and sugar bush. Kind of lost it towards the end there. But yeah, we have a lot of really great plants in the garden. We have a little bit of Clarkia that actually came up from some seed that we were trying to get more wildflowers in the garden. Another one of the goals is to have habitat for special status species. Of course, with the El Segundo blue butterfly, but also with the monarch butterfly, it was important to have narrow leaf milkweed. And so we have planted large sections of it in the bare areas where the California buckwheat used to be, or in areas that were just bare when I started working at the garden. And then this is just a beautiful flower of Opuntia littoralis. So here I just want to note, we have lots of room for improvement still in the garden. We need more species represented, but there are some rare plants in the garden, and it may not be super evident as of today, but I'm hoping to expand that. So we have the California rock flower, the Crocosoma californicum, which is a CNPS 1B2 plant. This is a pretty immature one that we're seeing here. And then we have the island green Dudleya, which is Dudleya varens, subspecies insularis, and it's also a CNPS 1B2 plant. Something that we are trying to do as part of conservation is seed sourcing. So we can only do this with local species. So it's important that we know exactly where the plants have come from. Most of the plants that I have introduced to the garden have come from the Palos Verdes Peninsula Land Conservancy's nursery. And so for those plants, we can provide the seed from those plants to conservation projects. And that can just be another role that the garden plays. This is also a nice opportunity to teach collection techniques and do some volunteer training about seeds. This plant is Lycium brevips, or Baja desert thorn. So the garden has gone through many changes, but there's still so much to do. We have some improvements coming, such as new signage, trail improvements, and irrigation planning. So this is the interpretive panel that I designed and installed in 2018. And it already looks like that, and it even fell off. So it's not functional anymore. We have already ordered a new panel, just like this one, but it's also an opportunity for us to think about what other panels or signage we could include in the garden to make it a little bit more educational. This is a blurry picture, my apologies, but this does show trail repair just by adding decomposed granite and tampers and shovels and very basically repairing the trail after a rain. I feel that we could be doing more. So ordering more decomposed granite and focusing on regrading the trail during the summer months in preparation for the rains. Of course, after each rain, we're responsible for caring for the trail. So we'll continue to do which is kind of band-aids. But I think what is important is to eventually redirect the rain from the path into the garden so that the rains are only watering the garden and the trail is just leading the water to the garden. Another consideration is that we have some very old bender board in the garden. One option is to remove it. I am worried about that just because it is helping to kind of keep in some of the mulch and soil that we have in the garden. We could also remove and replace it with or we could repair it, which is what we have been doing from time to time as these pieces start to come apart. But it is a tripping hazard for visitors. And it does help with the aesthetic of the garden. And then irrigation. We're thinking about long-term maintenance. A lot of the critters that live in the garden or come by the garden will bite into the irrigation to get water. And we have found that just about every month we're finding ourselves repairing and replacing pieces of the irrigation. So I'm going to be looking into maybe some hardier materials or potentially removing the irrigation and doing hand watering of the garden. All right, I know that was quick. That's how I usually roll with these presentations. So I really appreciate you listening. And I wanted to open it up to any questions.
I think there's one from D in chat. And
Oh,
do you want to read it, or I could read it out loud, I suppose?
do you mind reading it?
Sure. She says, "Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. And I wonder how successful planting the bulbs, Bludix, in pots was. We have this same issue at White Point. Tony has planted many bulbs with very little success."
Yeah. I have planted probably just a dozen of the Bludix or Dudleya or other bulbs, and I haven't had much success. I have seen them sprout on occasion, but they don't establish. So that picture was more about the removal of the buckwheat than the Bludix. But it is a good note to kind of keep trying. I think that's all you can do, and continue to do more research.
Well, there's a number of questions that show up in chat. Julian is asking, does the California buckwheat make a comeback from its seed bank?
Yeah, so the California buckwheat very well could, and I have been monitoring the garden as of late and noticed that there is some buckwheat coming back up. So I have to make that decision again, whether to allow a couple of buckwheats in the garden or to remove it all.
And then Cindy is asking how often you need to weed the non-native plants.
Yeah, Cindy may have noticed I didn't bring up weeds at all. When I first turned on the irrigation in the garden, there were a few weeds that popped up. But when I started putting mulch in the garden, I really didn't get many weeds. There's still a steady amount of, one or two weeds that pop up in the garden, but it's not really an issue that I have had with the garden. It's not my focus.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I know. It's been great.
And then David Berman is asking, how do you decide when, where, and what to mulch with? Okay, good following question. He didn't know it, but he had a great one there.
I agree. It's really important when you're working with volunteers not to let them just run rogue in the garden with mulch. You might find you've lost some plants because they buried them with mulch, especially new plants. So I usually mulch in the bare areas of the garden. I think it helps with the overall aesthetic, but it also keeps the moisture in the soil. It's on a point, so it does receive quite a bit of wind. So that's important. And then what to mulch with? When I started out, I was using donated mulch. And while that works well organically and everything, I found myself using Home Depot mulch because it was easy for the city to purchase and bring to the site, and they liked the uniform look of the brown mulch.
All right. And then Kathy is asking, how does someone volunteer for the monthly volunteer events?
I am realizing I didn't even put my email in this at all.
All right.
But
What is your email?
but yes, my email is Megan at SCC. Oh, I can type it in the chat.
I'm typing
Let me
for
do
you.
that. And so basically you can just email me and sign up for the event. Even if you don't email me, show up. The events are every third Sunday typically, and they move around holidays. So be ready for that. So it's better to email me if you are planning on attending.
Is there a backup email or a backup website method?
This is what I've used for almost a decade, Brent.
Okay.
Um, I just have people email me, but you're welcome to reach out to the city. The city knows when these events are, as well as the chapter, the CNPS chapter.
All right. Oh, so Dee is asking, how big is the PVIC space?
Oh, it's under an acre. That's all I know. I don't have the measurement memorized.
And Valeria says, thank you. Excellent presentation. What sort of irrigation do you think you'll select moving forward? And would you consider drip?
Yeah, I think I definitely would consider drip irrigation because a lot of the parts that are being, I don't want to say attacked, but yes, attacked by the animals in the garden, are the smaller micro tubing and the pieces of the sprinkler. Um, but I do like the overhead water that you get from the sprinklers. And I don't think it's realistic at this point to consider other types of sprinklers because it's too invasive to install.
Okay, and then Dee asks, what time are the volunteer events on third Sundays?
I'm doing a terrible job at at advertising these. Yes, so there is third Sundays at 10 a.m. and they end at 12 p.m. So it's a brief 2-hour event. A lot of that is taken up with education, which I think is really important.
And then David adds a little bit of perspective here as the former president of our chapter. So he says, Megan has done an outstanding job of getting volunteers to work in the garden. And I saw that in action in December when I went by for a visit. Before the garden coordinator, we had only a few board members at work days. This not only gets more work done, but gets young people excited about native plants. I have to agree. So this is you didn't make a big deal about it, but the native plant garden is a project that we're definitely involved in and care deeply about at the chapter level. So although it's on city land, there's some deep chapter involvement in its history.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
then
I'm actually here, and I can't resist just getting a word in, yeah, to just say thank you to Megan for all that she's done. When I say only a few board members, sometimes it was only 1 or 2 of us, and that didn't, and that was it. There was nobody else that came for those work days, and of course we didn't do it every month regularly. The other thing that Megan has done a fabulous job of is coordinating with the city of Rancho Palos Verdes, and Megan alluded to responding to requests that they had to clear out a particular vegetation or something for an event or something that was blocking the view. So having Megan there on a regular basis, people know who she is, has really made a big difference in keeping the, if you will, the owners of the property. They're not exactly the owners, but you know, since they're occupying it, they're the owners, but keeping those people happy. One of the issues, of course, with native plant gardens is that at certain times of year, they don't look bright green, or they're not blooming, or they don't have roses blooming or something. So having somebody who can answer to the city and keep them aware of what's going on has been really helpful. So other chapters, other people from around the state have looked at our garden in awe and trying to learn from it because it really has been an excellent project. I mean, it's supposed to be a demonstration garden, and so keeping the landowners, if you will, or the land managers, the other people or the other users happy has been very helpful. And of course, there's so many people that walk by there and walk through that garden that having it look nice, it's just such a fabulous advertisement for native plants. So thank you, Megan.
I'd have to say also that I'm in full agreement. But when I was there, what I particularly noticed was that Megan's got away with the young volunteers, and she was working with maybe high school students when I was there. And you know, some of them clearly hadn't ever had a pair of cicaders in their hand before, but she got them all working, and it was friendly and low pressure, and they felt welcomed. And I think they had a great experience, and certainly she had a great way with them. So thank you, Megan.
Wow, thank you guys. 2 presidents, my.
And D says, Megan is excellent at finding and retaining volunteers. You are awesome. We have to agree.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dee.
Kathy is asking what some of the side benefits of working in the garden are, such as she has a list here. Peregrine sightings, Nomad the tortoise, whale watching, others things.
Yeah, well, I would say Kathy has worked out there for the last several years, and she knows those side benefits. So all of the all of the ones that she mentioned are great examples. There's a great team of whale watchers, but you don't even have to be a whale watcher to watch the whales. You could be trimming up some of our vegetation that's growing over on the trails and be checking out the whales at the same time. There's some beautiful sunsets. When I was working at the garden in the evenings with Kathy and others, we would be able to see all these beautiful sunsets and views. It's right there on the edge of the ocean, and I did not show that very well in the presentation, but I think I have one picture just showing that it's right on the bluffs here, and you can turn on the irrigation during a dry season and just walk along these bluffs and really just enjoy yourself. So I encourage you to reach out to me if you are interested in volunteering on those Sundays, but also if you want to become one of our trained volunteers in the garden, that would be amazing.
All right, there's still a few more questions. They keep coming. Karen Hussman is asking, she's asking what you do to solve erosion problems and maintain the DG. She's got a garden with some steep trails in the preserve where she volunteers. And she says DG was installed by a team brought in with grant money. So the question really is, how do you bring in the expertise to solve erosion problems and maintain DG?
Right. Those were the long-term plans that I was talking about, and I can't say that I have implemented them just yet in the garden, but one of the things you can do is create grade dips, which are basically kind of a planned out way of engineering the trail a little bit by creating a divot that goes across and into the landscape. I might run into issues with that because I have those bender boards, but if you're working in a place that doesn't have those, I would consider doing that to try to keep the erosion from coming up time and time again by being proactive and creating those grade dips.
And then David Berman with another question. He asks, are you keeping some bare areas for bee nesting and for seed germination?
Oh, I forgot to say that. I wasn't thinking only for bees, but for lots of other bird species. A bare area is actually really important to have. And so the goal is not 100% coverage of the garden. And it also, from an interpretive element, would not be helpful to have 100% coverage because people would not be able to see the form of the plants very easily to do identification if they were all crowded in there. So I'm hoping to maximize the space in terms of function, but I am thinking that there will be areas that remain bare or with wildflowers.
All right, and then the last question for the moment, at least, is Betsy C. And Betsy asks, do you have gopher issues? Do you have to cage the roots when planting?
I think I had some gopher issues back in 2016 and 2017. I had the city kind of help me with some of that, but mostly you just have to plan for planting more plants than you really need because of the gophers. But I found that I kind of don't have a gopher problem anymore. It went away like in 2018. And so most of my issues are with rabbits chewing the tops of the plants.
All right. And then I've got a question. You mentioned that sugar bush seems to hedge well.
Mhm.
Are there other plants that hedge really well that were a surprise to you? I think a lot of native plant gardeners tend to prefer that wild look, but for those that want to hedge, what's an unexpected hedge plant?
Yeah, I've probably hedged every plant in that garden except for the immature ones. And I would say the one that was most surprising to me was the deer grass. Was the if you trim that down into a little dome, it'll pop back um, greener and healthier than ever. And that's been the case with most of the plants that I've pruned and hedged in the garden, is that they tend to come back with these new leaves. And I just say don't be afraid to prune and hedge, but maybe don't do it year round so that the animals have a chance.
All right.
If I could, I wanted to add just a couple more things. It's David Berman again. When Kathy asked about the benefits of working in the garden, there's a lot of studies that show actual health benefits, that it reduces inflammation in your body, reduces your blood pressure, and things like that. So just on the people in general, there's that benefit. And the other benefit is for the people passing by, they see volunteers working in action, and I think that's inspiring to the people that walk by. They won't necessarily come back to work at that garden, but whenever I've been out there, people always say, "Wow, thank you for working out here." And so I think that's a really great message. The last thing I want to say for right now is, when you were talking about having some bare areas and some covered areas and all that, I think balance is very important, certainly in a garden, but just in our lives in general. And so we need to balance the mulch to keep the weeds down and the moisture in the soil, with balancing some open areas for the birds and seeing the plant forms and what have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. I guess Rosalie reminds me that well, actually, the first thing I want to say is wonderful talk. There's a lot of great information here. I've got a kind of a CNPS axe to grind, which is to ask for volunteers once more. And I didn't elaborate a whole lot on the roles that we need to fill for the chapter council meeting. But one of the really important ones is to host people from out of town. And so if you have a spare room in your house, or maybe you've got a granny flat, or a trailer that's parked on your property, then there's certainly a lot of young people to travel to LA from CNPS who can afford to do so, or it makes it more affordable for them to do so if they've got a place to stay. So if you are able to host, please email one of us on the board and let us know. We've had a couple people come forward already, and we're very appreciative. I hope that we'll have a few more. So thank you very much. And gosh, it seems like the whole this whole effort about volunteering has payoffs that are both tangible and intangible. As Dr. David Berman reminded us, the health benefits can be great. Dee's asking, what is the timing for this hosting? My guess is that people would come into town on Thursday, the last day of February, or Friday, the 1st of March. They'd probably stay Friday night or Thursday night if they arrive then, and Saturday night, and then they may leave Sunday, or they may leave Monday, depending on the field trip they go on Sunday. And Karen takes note that wonderful talk, good pictures too. And Melanie is going to be in touch about volunteering. So wonderful, Melanie. All right, and Wally says he's able to help with the chapter council. So Wally, we've got your name. We will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
All right, I think that's it for this evening. Thank you for joining us. And Megan, thank you once again.
All right, thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
All right, good night, everyone. All right, ending the meeting in 3, 2, 1. Thank you.